He was just there to watch until the world chess champion mocked his silence in front of millions. Keanu Reeves had never played competitively. But then, he stepped forward, sat down at the board, and made one move that stopped everything. Was it genius or madness? What happened next shocked the world. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The lights were blinding. Cameras hovered from every angle. Thousands of spectators sat in hushed silence as the World Championship match reached its peak. The grand hall of the Palais Garnier in Paris, usually home to ballets and operas, had been transformed into a global chess arena. Velvet curtains hung high above the crowd. Spotlights followed every move on the polished mahogany chessboard resting at the center of the stage. Commentators whispered in multiple languages through headsets. Their voices streamed across networks to millions of viewers watching live around the world. It wasn't just a game, it was a spectacle, a clash of titans. Except tonight, something was off. One chair remained empty. The crowd shifted restlessly. On one side of the table sat Viktor Sokolov, five-time world chess champion, Russian-born prodigy, and cold-blooded tactician. His silver hair was neatly combed back, eyes narrowed behind thin-rimmed glasses. He wore a tailored black suit with a red pocket square, a picture of arrogance and control. His fingers tapped on the table, impatient. He had made his opening move 10 minutes ago. The cameras panned back to the stage entrance. And then he walked in. Keanu Reeves, dressed in a simple black blazer, dark jeans, and worn boots. He looked more like someone arriving at a poetry reading than a global chess championship. He nodded once at the crowd, silent, no wave, no smile, no, just that calm, almost solemn presence. The audience buzzed with confusion. A few even chuckled. The commentators hesitated. Wait, is he actually playing? Is this part of a promotion? No way he's here to compete. Keanu pulled out the chair and sat across from Sokolov. The crowd hushed. Sokolov's lips curled into a slight smirk. He leaned forward, voice captured perfectly by the microphone pinned to his lapel. Maybe next time, he said with a half-laugh, they'll invite someone who knows the rules. Laughter erupted. Awkward scattered, but loud enough to echo through the hall. Keanu said nothing. He didn't flinch. He simply looked at the board, calm, focused. His hand hovered over the pieces. Viktor leaned back, confident, soaking in the spotlight. I mean, really? You're an actor, Mr. Reeves, not a chess master. Perhaps you've confused this with a movie set. The camera zoomed in on Keanu's face. Still no reaction. Not anger, not embarrassment, just silence. But his hand moved. Slowly, deliberately, he picked up a pawn and slid it forward. The game had begun. And what no one knew, not the audience, not the commentators, not even Viktor himself, was that Keanu hadn't come here to win a title. He had come for something much deeper, something personal, a quiet promise kept for decades. The hall remained silent as Keanu's pawn settled onto the board. The soft clack of wood echoed like a challenge no one expected him to make. Commentators exchanged confused glances. This wasn't a celebrity cameo. This wasn't a charity event. This wasn't a scripted moment. Keanu was actually playing. Viktor raised an eyebrow. Bold, he muttered, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. A pawn. How poetic. He responded instantly, sliding his knight with sharp precision, making sure the cameras caught the elegance of the move. Every tilt of his wrist had been practiced, polished, perfected. Keanu kept his eyes on the board. His breathing stayed steady, his hands didn't shake. He didn't look like a man offended by mockery. He looked like someone carrying a quiet truth no one else in the room could see. Far above the arena, a massive screen showed the two players side by side. On one side, Viktor Sokolov, the champion the world recognized. On the other, Keanu Reeves, an unexpected challenger who had stepped into a storm without a single word. People watching at home flooded social media with questions. Why is Keanu there? Is he doing this as a joke? Is Viktor going to crush him? But someone in the comments wrote something different. "Look at Keanu's eyes. He's not here for fun." Another replied, "He looks like a man on a mission." Back in the hall, Viktor made another move, sharp, aggressive. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to humiliate, to show the world that genius and celebrity didn't belong on the same stage. Keanu studied the board. 30 seconds passed, then 60. The commentators assumed he was panicking. They whispered urgently into microphones, "He's overwhelmed. This isn't good. He's already falling behind." But the truth was something none of them could sense. Keanu wasn't slow, he was remembering. The shape of the board, the pattern of the pieces, the rhythm of a game taught to him long before fame ever touched his life. A game played in small rooms with flickering lights and chipped furniture. A game taught by a father figure who believed chess wasn't about intelligence. It was about patience, sacrifice, honor. Keanu lifted his bishop and moved it with gentle precision. The audience leaned forward. Something about the move felt deliberate, old, rooted in a style out of another era. Viktor frowned, only for a moment, but enough to reveal something the cameras caught clearly. Surprise. Just a flicker, but real. Keanu met his eyes for the first time since sitting down. The hall seemed to hold its breath. He didn't speak the words out loud, but his calm stare said it clearly. "I didn't come here to play your game." A faint tension rippled through the hall. It was subtle at first, like the quiet shift before a storm. Viktor adjusted his glasses and leaned in. He studied Keanu's formation, expecting randomness, expecting the clumsy pattern of a novice. But the arrangement didn't feel chaotic. It felt intentional. There was a shape to it, a memory of an older style of play that few modern champions respected, much less understood. He masked his confusion with a dry laugh. "Interesting," he said, though the edge in his voice betrayed irritation. Trying to surprise me, Mr. Reeves' Keanu didn't answer. He simply waited, letting Viktor fill the silence with his own discomfort. The crowd sensed the shift. The laughter that had echoed moments earlier no longer seemed appropriate. People leaned forward, curious, unsure. The mood was changing, bending around Keanu's quiet focus. Viktor made his next move with unnecessary force, the piece hitting the board louder than needed. A small gesture, but revealing. He wasn't amused anymore. He was irritated, challenged, and the cameras caught everything. Keanu moved again, smooth, calm, like he had all the time in the world. "What is he doing?" a commentator whispered. "This doesn't look like panic anymore." Another voice answered, "It looks like purpose." Viktor's jaw tightened. He didn't like that word, purpose. He prided himself on being a machine of logic, a predator of precision. He didn't believe in poetry or symbolism on the chessboard. To him, the game was war, nothing more. So, why did this simple actor, this quiet outsider, look so steady? Why wasn't he breaking? Viktor struck again, moving his queen aggressively into Keanu's territory. It was a psychological attack as much as a strategic one. He wanted the world to see dominance, control, superiority. Keanu's response stunned the front row. He smiled, not mockingly, not defiantly, just a soft, almost nostalgic smile. As if the board in front of him wasn't a battlefield, but a memory. A place he had visited long before this night. A place tied to someone he had lost. He moved a pawn forward slow and steady, another quiet step in a pattern only he understood. The commentators exhaled in confusion. "Why that move?" "It looks symbolic." Symbolic of what Keanu didn't answer. He never would. Not tonight. Because the truth behind every move, the reason he walked into this hall, the promise woven into his silence, the memory carved into every piece he touched, belonged to a story no one else knew yet. A story that did not begin with Viktor Sokolov. A story that did not begin in Paris. A story that began decades ago in a small room where a man who loved him once whispered, "Remember, Keanu? Chess isn't about winning. It's about who you become along the way." And tonight, the world was about to learn why he came. Not to win, but to honor the one person who taught him how to play at all. Long before the lights of Paris, long before Viktor Sokolov's taunts echoed across a global broadcast, long before reporters labeled Keanu Reeves the most unlikely challenger to ever sit across from a world champion, there was a small one-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles with peeling paint, crooked blinds, and the faint smell of cleaning solution that lingered in the hallway every night. This was where Keanu learned to play chess. He was 9 years old, then thin as a rail quiet, with hair that constantly fell into his eyes. His mother worked double shifts, and most afternoons Keanu came home to the rhythmic sound of a broom sweeping the kitchen floor. His stepfather, Raymond Carter, worked as a janitor at a local middle school. He walked home every day, shoes coated in dust, uniform faded from years of bleach and sunlight. But every evening, without fail, Raymond would sit at the kitchen table, pull out a battered wooden chessboard, and nod for Keanu to join him. The board was handmade. Uneven squares, carved pieces, the edges scorched from a house fire that had destroyed nearly everything Raymond once owned. The board was the only object he managed to save. He told Keanu it was because the board represented the one thing his own father gave him before he died. Keanu remembered the weight of that board the first time Raymond placed it in front of him. Heavy, solid, a piece of a life he never got to know yet still carried forward. They never played with the television on. They never played with music. They didn't need anything else. Just the board, the pieces, and the calm that settled over the room when Raymond spoke softly through each lesson. Chess isn't about winning, he would say. It's about seeing the whole picture. It's about who you become when life corners you. Keanu didn't understand the depth of those words then. He only knew the warmth of his stepfather's presence, a man who never raised his voice. A man who spoke gently even when the world had been harsh to him. A man who worked unnoticed and uncelebrated, yet carried dignity in everything he did. As years passed, the lessons continued. Raymond taught him openings, endgames, and strange old strategies he claimed were passed down through generations. But more than moves, he taught Keanu patience, humility, and something else he wouldn't fully understand until decades later: sacrifice. One night when Keanu was 12, Raymond pushed a pawn toward the center of the board and said, "This one can only move forward, never backward. Sometimes life is like that. Sometimes the only way out is through." Keanu moved his knight without speaking. He didn't know that one day that lesson would become a quiet flame inside him, a flame that would guide him into a hall filled with strangers, cameras, and a cruel champion who believed the game belonged only to the gifted. But Keanu wasn't there because he believed he was gifted. He was there because of Raymond. Keanu remembered the night he nearly lost his stepfather's chessboard forever. It was summer in Los Angeles, a dry heat that clung to everything. He had fallen asleep on the couch, the chessboard still open from an unfinished game. Sometime after midnight, he woke to the smell of smoke. The apartment building was on fire. Neighbors pounded on doors. Sirens wailed in the distance. Flames from the unit below licked the walls like hungry shadows. Keanu sat upright, heart pounding, unsure whether to run or scream. But then Raymond grabbed him, pulled him toward the hallway, and shouted for everyone to move now. Now. Outside, the air swirled with ash. People stared in shock as firefighters battled the blaze. Raymond stood beside Keanu, breathing hard, soot covering his hands. Only when the worst had passed did he look down at the object he clutched under his arm. The chessboard. Its edges were scorched deeper than before, charred enough that some squares faded into black. The pieces smelled like burnt wood, but it had survived. Keanu never forgot the expression on Raymond's face when he placed the board into his hands, a mix of exhaustion and gratitude, as if saving the board meant saving a part of himself, or maybe saving a part of them. After that night, every move they played carried even more meaning. The board wasn't just an heirloom anymore. It was a reminder of what they had endured together. Years later, when Raymond became sick, the board sat between them on quiet afternoons. The chemotherapy drained him, yet he insisted on playing. Sometimes he moved slowly, sometimes his eyes closed mid-game, but he always insisted on finishing. On one of those final afternoons, Raymond touched a pawn and whispered, "A man is remembered not for what he wins, but for what he protects." Keanu didn't speak. His throat tightened around the words he wanted to say, words he still carries. After the funeral, the board became his most treasured possession. So when the International Global Chess Federation invited him to participate in a charity exhibition, Keanu accepted. Not because he believed he could win, not because he wanted the attention, but because for the first time, the world was talking about using chess to raise awareness for struggling communities. And Keanu knew what his stepfather would have done. He would have shown up. Even now, as thousands watch him face Viktor Sokolov across a grand stage, Keanu's thoughts drift back to the cramped apartment and the faint scent of cleaning supplies. He hears Raymond's voice, steady and warm, reminding him that the game reveals a person's character. But there was another reason Keanu accepted the invitation, a reason no one in the arena or watching at home could guess. For months, he had been quietly funding a secret initiative, a global program aimed at supporting children in underprivileged neighborhoods who showed talent for chess but had no resources, no mentors, no opportunities. Keanu wasn't just honoring Raymond's memory. He was building something Raymond would never have imagined possible. A world where children like him could have more than a chance. A world where kindness moved first. Keanu kept the initiative secret because he didn't want credit. The program wasn't about headlines, interviews, or applause. It was about kids who needed what he once needed. A quiet hand on their shoulder. A safe place to learn. Someone who believed in them even when the world didn't. The name of the initiative was simple, the Raymond Project. It existed only on paper for now, a small team hired quietly, a pilot program in 3 cities, scholarships ready to launch, training centers waiting for approval. Everything was almost in place, but Keanu still hadn't gone public. He wanted the announcement to be meaningful. He wanted it to honor Raymond properly. And he needed the world's attention, not for himself, but for the cause. The international chess match provided exactly that. This was the stage. This was the moment. Millions of viewers, cameras everywhere, commentators talking non-stop about talent pressure and celebrity. Keanu could feel the anticipation buzzing in the arena like electricity, but nothing felt intimidating. He wasn't here to prove he belonged at the world's table. He was here because of one memory that refused to fade. A memory of Raymond sitting at the kitchen counter, hands rough and tired from cleaning office floors, smiling softly as he set up the wooden pieces. A memory of that quiet voice saying, "If you ever get a chance to lift someone, even just a little, you take it." That memory guided every moment. Even now, as Viktor Sokolov mocked him on live television, Keanu didn't feel anger. He only felt a heavy, patient resolve. Viktor's laughter didn't reach him. The audience's reaction didn't sting. Keanu had lived through much harsher things than ridicule. He had watched the man who raised him scrub floors for people who never bothered to learn his name. He had seen dignity survive disrespect. That memory made him unshakable. What mattered was the board, the squares, the moves, the chance to honor a man who never had a spotlight. Keanu rested his fingertips on the burnt wooden surface. The char marks caught the light, the same scars from the fire all those years ago. To the spectators, the board was nothing but a prop. To Keanu, it was a heartbeat. He inhaled slowly. He could feel Raymond beside him, not as a ghost, not as a fantasy, but in the calm that settled over him, in the stillness that helped him ignore the cameras and the eyes and the noise, in the quiet conviction that he wasn't here to win a game. He was here to begin something. Far beyond this room, far beyond chess, Viktor leaned forward, ready to make the first official move. The audience hushed. The commentators whispered about technique and tension. Screens flashed with live reactions from around the world. Keanu didn't look at any of it. He looked at one empty square on the board, one space, one memory. Raymond had always said, "The first move tells the world who you are." Keanu knew exactly what his first move would say, and soon the world would know too. The press conference room in Dubai was packed long before Keanu arrived. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras lined the walls. International broadcasters hovered near the stage, waiting for a moment worth capturing. The upcoming exhibition match had already become a global spectacle, not because Keanu was expected to win, but because the world wanted to see what would happen when an actor stepped onto a stage normally reserved for prodigies and grandmasters. The buzz felt like static electricity clinging to every surface. Viktor Sokolov entered first, surrounded by security and handlers. He looked like he owned the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, sharp jaw, cold eyes that scanned people like pieces on a chessboard. He wore a navy suit and a smirk that seemed permanently etched in place. To most of the world, he was a champion. To himself, he was untouchable. As he took his seat, the room quieted, waiting for the star of the chess world to speak. Then Keanu walked in, no entourage, no fanfare, just a simple black jacket, dark jeans, and that familiar, gentle smile. He waved politely at a few reporters who called his name. He moved slowly, intentionally, almost as if trying not to disturb the energy of the room. He took his seat beside Viktor without adjusting anything, without clearing his throat, without trying to take space. He simply sat and waited. The contrast was startling. Reporters noticed immediately. Cameras zoomed in. Microphones shifted closer. Even before anyone spoke, the world felt the tension between two men who approached the same stage from entirely different universes. The moderator welcomed the audience and opened the session. But Viktor didn't wait for a question. He leaned into the microphone and spoke loud enough for every camera to pick it up. "I want to make something clear," he said. "I'm here to play serious chess, not entertain tourists." The room froze. A murmur rolled through the reporters like a wave. A few chuckles echoed from the back. Several cameras snapped pictures at once, filling the air with clicks. The moderator tried to interrupt, but Viktor kept speaking. "Chess is a battlefield. It is not a charity event. It is not a movie premiere. It is not a place for celebrities who think this board is a stage." He gestured at Keanu without even looking at him. "Some of us trained since childhood, some of us sacrificed, and some of us," he paused deliberately, "are here for publicity." The insult landed in the room like a dropped stone. Every reporter turned to Keanu. For many celebrities, this would have been the moment to defend themselves, to correct the record, to fire back. But Keanu simply folded his hands on the table and smiled softly, as though Viktor hadn't insulted him at all, as though the world wasn't watching for an argument. He didn't look angry. He didn't look offended. He looked calm, almost peaceful. One reporter raised her hand and asked Mr. Reeves, "Would you like to respond to that?" Keanu shook his head. "No, I'm just grateful to be here." And that was all he said. The room didn't know what to do with that answer. The simplicity of it disarmed them. Viktor narrowed his eyes, annoyed that his attack hadn't landed the way he wanted. Outside Dubai, millions watched the live stream. Comments flooded social media. Some mocked Keanu's silence, others defended him fiercely. But far away in a small village in Uganda, a young girl whispered something entirely different. "He reminds me of Papa." In a modest clay brick house on the outskirts of Mbale, Uganda, 12-year-old Jamila Odanga sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide, as she watched the press conference on a flickering television powered by a solar panel her uncle had installed. The image wasn't perfect. The sound occasionally cut out. But none of that mattered. She could see Keanu clearly enough. Her grandmother Niabwa sat beside her peeling cassava for dinner. She wasn't particularly interested in chess or celebrities, but she occasionally glanced at the screen when Jamila gasped or whispered something under her breath. Jamila had discovered chess only a year earlier when a charity worker donated a plastic board to her school. She wasn't great at it yet, but she loved the calm it brought, the way the board silenced everything else, the way her late father used to tell her that patience was strength. Chess reminded her of him, quiet, steady, gentle. So when she saw Keanu Reeves sitting in front of the world taking insults without flinching, something stirred inside her. He didn't argue. He didn't look embarrassed. He simply breathed, smiled, and listened. The whole world might have misunderstood him, but Jamila felt she recognized something sincere, something familiar. Her grandmother paused her peeling. "What did you say, child?" Jamila pointed at the screen. "Him. That man." "You know him?" her grandmother asked. "No," Jamila said softly, "but he reminds me of Papa." Her grandmother stopped moving entirely. The cassava knife rested in her palm. She looked at Keanu, really looked this time, searching for whatever her granddaughter was seeing. And then she understood. Jamila's father, Moses Odanga, had been a teacher, soft-spoken, patient, always ready to help anyone who needed it. When a local flood destroyed half the village, Moses worked day and night to rescue families trapped in their homes. He never complained. He never raised his voice. He simply did what needed to be done. He died months later from an infection no one realized he had. What remained in Jamila's memory was his gentleness, his quiet bravery, his belief that calmness was not weakness, but wisdom. So, yes, she saw something familiar in Keanu's calm. Nyabwa wrapped an arm around the girl's shoulders. "He is like your father," she agreed. Kind, not loud, but strong. Back in the press conference room, the reporters were growing bolder. Viktor's comments opened the door, and others followed. A journalist from Germany asked if Keanu thought he was insulting the chess community by participating. Another asked if he expected sympathy when he lost. Another asked whether this match was just a publicity stunt for an upcoming movie. Keanu took each question the same way. Calm, polite, without defensiveness, without irritation. "I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm here to learn. I respect everyone at this table." No matter how pointed the question, Keanu's answers never changed their temperature. They stayed warm, steady, genuine. But the internet was not nearly as gracious. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Memes spread quickly. People joked that Viktor would defeat Keanu in under 10 moves. Others claimed Keanu was embarrassing himself. A few wondered why an actor was taking up space meant for real champions. Troll accounts posted edited videos mocking his calm expression. Some even ridiculed the old wooden chessboard he carried with him, but none of it reached him. What the world took as passivity was something entirely different. Keanu wasn't ignoring anything. He was choosing how to respond. He'd learned long ago that anger only fed cruelty. Silence diffused it. Patience outlasted it. And far away in Uganda, a young girl continued to watch him, the glow of the small television reflecting in her eyes. "He's not afraid," Jamila whispered. "No," her grandmother agreed. "He knows who he is." As the press conference neared its end, the moderator attempted to shift the tone by asking lighter questions, but Viktor wasn't finished. He leaned back, forcing a smug smile, and delivered one final strike. "Tomorrow," he said, "the world will see the difference between a master and a tourist." Reporters murmured again. Cameras flashed. The moment was unmistakably cruel, crafted to humiliate Keanu publicly. Everyone waited for him to push back even a little. But Keanu simply offered Viktor a gentle nod, as if acknowledging pain rather than absorbing it. Then he stood, bowed his head respectfully to the press, and walked off stage without a single defensive word. The clip went viral in minutes. To some, Keanu looked defeated. To others, out of place. But to a quiet girl in Uganda, he looked like someone choosing grace in a world addicted to noise. Jamila rested her chin on her knees as the broadcast ended. Her grandmother switched off the television, but the glow of the screen seemed to stay with the girl. She whispered into the silence, "Papa would have smiled like that." Her grandmother touched her cheek. "Kindness is strength, child. One day the world will see, and the world would, far sooner than anyone expected." The arena lights dimmed as the match began focusing into a warm glow that bathed the table where Keanu and Viktor sat facing each other. No press conference tension remained. This was pure silence, the kind that wrapped the entire room in anticipation. Tens of thousands watched from their seats. Millions watched across the world. Even Jamila in Uganda sat on the floor of her small home, leaning so close to the television that her grandmother had to gently pull her back. Keanu rested his hands on the burnt wooden board, breathing slowly, grounding himself the way Raymond had once taught him. Viktor held a rigid posture, staring at Keanu with a confidence bordering on impatience. To Viktor, this match was already decided. Keanu was not a real challenger. He was a delay, a novelty, an interruption before the celebrations began. The referee signaled the start. Viktor moved first, opening with a classical king's pawn advance, a confident, dominant beginning. He didn't even look up. He expected Keanu to respond predictably if he understood the proper responses at all. Keanu studied the board for a long moment, not out of uncertainty, but reverence. This wasn't a game he entered casually. Every move was a message, a memory, a step towards something deeper than winning. When he finally reached out, the arena held its breath. He moved a pawn. Not the standard reply, not the expected defense. He pushed a pawn from a flank position, an opening so old, so unusual, that many modern players dismissed it entirely. The commentators reacted instantly. Is he serious? That's outdated by at least a century. It's not just risky, it's reckless. People online reacted even faster. Comments flooded the live stream. Some laughed, some argued, some accused Keanu of disrespecting the match. But Keanu didn't pay attention to any of it. He wasn't here to impress commentators or satisfy expectations. He opened exactly as Raymond once taught him, in the cramped corner of their apartment, where shadows stretched over the board and the smell of burnt wood filled the air. Raymond had called it the Star Gambit, a quiet sacrifice, an intentional loss early on to build something unexpected later. Viktor raised an eyebrow at the pawn move, amused. He gave a small shake of his head as if confirming to himself that this was indeed going to be easy. He captured the pawn without hesitation, a clean, efficient strike. Keanu nodded, unfazed. He moved another piece slowly, thoughtfully, the same way he had always approached challenges in life. The board began to form a shape that confused even seasoned commentators. Nothing aligned with modern theory. Pieces looked scattered, uncoordinated, drifting toward the center without any clear strategy. One commentator whispered, "It looks like chaos." Another added, "I don't think he understands the depth of Viktor's attack potential." But Viktor didn't look victorious yet. Something about Keanu's approach nagged at him. It felt too calm, too intentional. Viktor had played enough exhibition matches to know when someone was overwhelmed, and Keanu didn't show any signs of panic. The actor appeared grounded, even serene, as if every unusual move had a quiet purpose. Back in Uganda, Jamila leaned in even closer. Her grandmother had started to watch with interest as well. "Why isn't he protecting his pieces?" her grandmother asked softly. "He is," Jamila whispered. "Just not yet." Her eyes didn't blink. Her voice dropped. "He's setting a trap." As the match progressed, Viktor's confidence grew, but so did a faint irritation at the edges of his composure. The board in front of him didn't look like any he'd faced before. It wasn't structured. It wasn't disciplined. It didn't match openings he'd memorized since childhood or variations he'd practiced thousands of times. Keanu's position looked messy, uneven, even fragile. And yet something about it felt wrong. This wasn't the board of a beginner making random mistakes. Viktor had humiliated plenty of amateurs before, and their games always followed the same pattern of fear and uncertainty. They grabbed pieces without thinking, panicked at pressure, reacted instead of planning. But Keanu's hand never hesitated. Every move was slow, steady, touched with a kind of tenderness Viktor found infuriating. As if the board meant something more than a contest. Commentators kept tearing into Keanu's choices. "He's giving up too much space. That diagonal is wide open. What is he doing?" "He can't possibly recover from this. Viktor will crush him." In most matches, Viktor absorbed commentary as background noise. Tonight it fueled him. Each criticism of Keanu felt like validation. Every dismissal confirmed his belief that this match didn't belong on his record. It was a performance, and he was ready to end it quickly. But when Viktor lunged forward with an aggressive knight maneuver meant to trap one of Keanu's bishops, Keanu responded with a soft, almost reluctant sacrifice. He let the bishop go, didn't defend it, didn't blink. The audience gasped. Sacrificing that bishop so early made no sense. It narrowed Keanu's defense. It weakened his position. It defied every principle in modern opening theory. And Viktor laughed under his breath. Pathetic, he whispered, barely audible to himself. But when he captured the bishop, Viktor noticed something unsettling. Keanu's remaining pieces suddenly had more lines, more space, more movement. The board hadn't collapsed. It had shifted, subtly, quietly. And now Viktor's knight, his attacking piece, was boxed into a corner. The commentators went quiet, then confused. Wait, hold on. That changes the center structure completely. Keanu made another move. A pawn, just a small, humble pawn sliding forward one square as though it had all the time in the world. Viktor's jaw tightened. This wasn't random. There was a shape forming something unorthodox, years removed from the modern engines and programs Viktor trained with. The game no longer looked like chaos. It looked like the beginning of an old pattern. Not outdated, just forgotten. In Uganda, Jamila smiled softly. "He's not playing to win fast," she murmured. "He's playing to make Viktor overconfident." Her grandmother nodded thoughtfully. "Your father used to say that some battles are won before the enemy knows they've begun." Jamila's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Keanu's playing like someone who's already lost something. People like that don't fear losing pieces. Back in Dubai, Viktor shifted in his chair. The crowd sensed his discomfort for the first time. The champion wasn't supposed to look confused. Not ever. Keanu stared at the board with calm, almost meditative stillness. And slowly, very slowly, the atmosphere in the room began to change. Viktor straightened in his chair, forcing his mind back into the sharp discipline that made him a 5-time world champion. He pushed aside the irritation creeping through him and studied the board with renewed focus. Yet, the more he studied, the more puzzling the position became. Keanu had allowed his formation to warp into something strange, something uneven, but every time Viktor reached for an immediate punishment, the line fizzled into nothing. It was like chasing smoke. He moved another piece aggressively, slamming it harder than necessary. The sound echoed through the arena and made the nearest cameras tremble. The gesture didn't shake Keanu. When it became his turn, he moved with the same unbroken patience as before. He didn't seem to notice the tension, or maybe he simply chose not to feed it. When Keanu slid another pawn forward, Viktor's eyes narrowed. The move was too quiet, too subtle, yet it pressed against one of his central pieces with an unexpected rhythm. "Why does this feel familiar?" Viktor muttered under his breath. Something in the opening, the tempo, the sacrifices, they tugged at a distant memory from his earliest days of training in Siberia. An old coach once demonstrated a forgotten system used by underfunded players who relied on tricky, resilient structures to fight stronger opponents. He hadn't seen it in decades. Was Keanu using that numb? And it's impossible. That system required a player to absorb pressure without breaking. It required emotional discipline most competitors never mastered. But as Viktor watched Keanu steady his breath, he realized the actor wasn't shaking. He wasn't sweating. He wasn't drowning under pressure. He was waiting. And that realization unsettled him more than any tactical surprise. Across the world, Jamila leaned toward the screen and whispered, "He's pulling Viktor forward, making him impatient." Her grandmother placed a hand on her shoulder. Only those who have survived storms understand how to fight slowly. On the board, Viktor made another forceful move, convinced he was closing in on the win he'd promised. But the moment he released the piece, Keanu's eyes lowered, studying a new alignment that had formed in the tension. Something quiet, something sharp. The trap wasn't complete yet, but the shape of it finally appeared. The deeper the match went, the more Viktor's confidence began to twist into something darker. His forced smile tightened. His fingers tapped the table. The elegant composure he carried into the arena started to fracture. Every time Keanu made a quiet, deliberate move, something in Viktor's expression hardened, as if each piece Keanu touched pressed against an old bruise inside him. He leaned back in his chair and scoffed loud enough for the microphones to capture it. "You think that move helps you?" he said, voice dripping with condescension. "This isn't a movie, Reeves. There's no director to save you." The crowd chuckled at first, happy to echo the champion's arrogance. Viktor thrived under their approval. He made another mocking gesture, shaking his head dramatically when Keanu advanced a small, seemingly insignificant pawn. "Pathetic," he muttered. "You play like a child learning shapes." People laughed again, but this time the laughter didn't have the same energy behind it. It thinned out, uncertain, like an echo struggling to bounce off a distant wall. A few spectators exchanged glances. The commentators paused mid-sentence. Something felt different now, something subtle, but unmistakable. Keanu didn't react to the cruelty. He didn't look hurt or embarrassed. He didn't flinch. He simply studied the board, breathing slowly through his nose, letting Viktor's words pass over him like distant noise. His pieces, though scattered at first, had begun to align into a strange, poetic formation. They weren't arranged with sharp, modern precision. They moved like a story unfolding, each sacrifice forming a rhythm, each quiet push shaping a hidden intention. The camera zoomed in on Keanu's face, calm, focused, compassionate even. Viktor hated that expression. His next move was sloppy. He tried to cover it by smirking, but the strain around his eyes revealed the truth. In his mind, he knew he should stop reacting emotionally. He knew he needed to stay disciplined. But something about Keanu's silence cut deeper than any insult thrown back at him could have, because Viktor had grown up in a world where silence was never kind. A flicker of memory crossed his face, too quick for the cameras to catch, but not quick enough to escape Keanu's observant gaze. Viktor slammed another piece down in irritation. "Move, actor," he snapped. "Or are you waiting for applause?" Keanu lifted his eyes for the first time in several turns. He didn't say anything. He simply looked at Viktor, really looked at him with a softness that didn't match the intensity of battle. The room fell quiet for a moment, unsure why. Inside Viktor, something began to unravel. He wasn't reacting to Keanu's skill. He was reacting to Keanu's gentleness, the same gentleness Viktor had learned to fear. And the audience sensed the shift. The laughter stopped entirely now. People leaned forward, not to mock Keanu anymore, but to understand what they were witnessing. Because on that board, amid the chaos of Viktor's aggression, Keanu's pieces weren't just surviving. They were telling a story rooted in patience, a story shaped by suffering, a story Viktor recognized in ways he didn't want to. Viktor shifted in his seat, feeling a discomfort he couldn't name. Every time Keanu made a move, something inside him tightened. It wasn't fear of losing. Not yet. It was something older, something heavier. A sensation he thought he buried when he left his childhood home in Siberia. Keanu slid a knight across the board with gentle precision. The move wasn't threatening, not directly, but it landed in a position that forced Viktor to rethink his next steps. It blocked a path he needed. It slowed the pace he preferred. It reminded him of playing against someone who understood patience better than force, his father. A ghost rose in Viktor's mind, the sound of boots on cracked wooden floors, the smell of coal dust in the air, the stern voice of a man who believed that love was a reward earned only through victory. Viktor had grown up in a mining town where weather was harsh and kindness was rarer still. His father, Oleg Sokolov, had never touched his son's face gently, never smiled at him without condition, never praised him unless a medal hung around Viktor's neck. But he had taught him chess. Chess was their language, their battlefield, their unspoken agreement that emotion belonged nowhere except in the desperation of an endgame. Viktor remembered sitting at a rickety kitchen table at age 7, freezing fingers hovering over wooden pieces. His father leaned behind him like a shadow. "Think faster," Oleg growled. "You're wasting my time. Winning requires instinct. Weakness requires punishment." When Viktor lost the board, flipped. When he won, Oleg poured vodka and claimed Viktor's victory as his own. Love flickered only in the moments after triumph, when medals were polished and photographs taken. But that love never lasted. It evaporated as soon as the applause faded. Now, watching Keanu move with quiet intention, Viktor felt that old pressure twisting in his chest. The same pressure he felt as a child when he hesitated too long and heard the slow inhale behind him, his father preparing disappointment. Keanu placed another piece down softly. Viktor stared at it longer than necessary. He didn't understand why the gentleness bothered him so deeply. It shouldn't matter. Chess wasn't about emotion. It wasn't about kindness. His father had taught him that kindness was a form of surrender. But here was Keanu refusing cruelty at every turn, refusing anger, refusing fear. And each refusal felt like a challenge Viktor didn't know how to answer. Across the arena, spectators leaned forward again, whispering, wondering. Something strange was happening on that board. Viktor's pieces looked stronger, his position more dominant. But the flow of the game no longer felt one-sided. Keanu's strange, story-like structure had begun connecting. Pawns aligned like stepping stones. The knight's shift had opened a diagonal. The rook waited quietly, guarding a lane Viktor had overlooked. The commentators hesitated before speaking. "I don't like this one," muttered. "This position is uncomfortable." Another added, "I can't believe I'm saying this, but Keanu's shaping something subtle." Viktor clenched his jaw. He hated subtle. He hated softness. He hated the way Keanu looked at him, not with fear or defiance, but with something Viktor hadn't felt since childhood: recognition. Viktor pushed his next piece with unnecessary force, the sound cracking through the arena like a warning. He didn't understand why his heartbeat had begun to race. Keanu wasn't winning. Viktor still held the stronger position. But strength on the board wasn't the problem. It was the quietness across from him. The stillness he couldn't shake. The same stillness he remembered from the rare moments when his father watched him silently judging measuring, waiting for a mistake. Keanu responded with another gentle move, a quiet reinforcement, along the center. It was nothing dramatic, nothing threatening yet. Viktor felt cornered by the calmness behind it. He glared across the table. Keanu simply breathed, eyes, steady expression, warm rather than triumphant. That expression cut deeper than any insult, because Keanu wasn't mocking him. Keanu was seeing him, and Viktor didn't want to be seen. He leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "You're wasting everyone's time." He waited for Keanu to shrink back, to show embarrassment, to react the way his father taught him opponents should react to intimidation. But Keanu only nodded, as if acknowledging Viktor's pain rather than the words themselves. The crowd noticed the shift. Their earlier laughter felt wrong now. A few people lowered their eyes. A quiet tension spread through the arena as they watched the champion unravel one breath at a time. Keanu made another move, a rook gliding into a lane Viktor had left open while focusing too hard on attack. It wasn't a trap yet, but it positioned the board differently, more balanced, more alive. The commentators leaned in. "That's interesting. That rook isn't attacking, it's protecting something." Viktor felt heat rise in his face. Protecting. Something he had never been taught to value on the board or in life. His father's lessons echoed like iron against bone. Only fools defend, winners crush. Keanu looked at Viktor again, not with challenge, not with pity, with understanding, as if he knew what kind of ghosts Viktor carried into every match, as if he recognized the cruelty not as arrogance, but as fear. That look made Viktor's chest tighten. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar rising in his throat. Not anger, not confidence, something closer to vulnerability. And that frightened him far more than losing ever could. The match surged across the world like a spark catching dry fields. Within minutes, hashtags exploded on every platform. In New York, Paris, Seoul, Nairobi, Sydney and Cairo, millions of viewers tuned in, drawn not just by the name of Viktor Sokolov, but by the unexpected presence of Keanu Reeves sitting across from him with quiet stillness. The live stream counters climbed in real-time numbers, jumping by hundreds of thousands every minute. Broadcasters reported that the match was trending in more than 150 countries, the kind of global reach usually reserved for World Cups or royal weddings. The comments scrolling beneath the live stream were divided. Some cheered Viktor's sharp play and biting sarcasm. They called him a genius, a lion, a king of the board. Others defended Keanu with a passion that surprised even the moderators. They praised his composure, his patience, the way he didn't respond to cruelty with cruelty. A few typed frantically asking why he was there at all, as though trying to decode a mystery unfolding before them. Meanwhile, celebrities chimed in. A famous singer in London posted a video saying Viktor's intensity was thrilling. A retired athlete in the United States said Keanu reminded him of every underdog who ever stepped into a ring, knowing the world expected them to lose. A novelist in Argentina tweeted that Keanu's silence was the most powerful move on the board. In a small cafe in Rio de Janeiro, an older man wiped down a counter while glancing occasionally at the television mounted above the espresso machine. His clothes were simple. His hands carried the worn roughness of years spent scrubbing floors and emptying trash bins. He was a retired janitor who had raised 3 children alone. His name was Antonio, and he had followed Keanu's career for years, not because of the movies, but because of an old story he'd once read about Keanu traveling on the subway and giving up his seat without hesitation. Antonio leaned closer to the screen. He didn't understand every move on the board, but he understood the look in Keanu's eyes. A look he'd seen in mirrors during the hardest years of his life. A quiet acceptance of hardship, a refusal to fight cruelty with cruelty. He murmured to himself, not realizing customers were listening. He's playing the game his father taught him, not the one the world wants. A young barista paused halfway through making a cappuccino. What do you mean, Senor Antonio? Antonio gestured at the screen with a soft sigh. Some people learn chess to win, others learn it to survive. When you grow up with pain, you don't strike first. You wait, you breathe, you see everything. On the broadcast, Viktor pushed out another aggressive move, leaning back with a smirk. Keanu nodded slowly, placed a hand on the side of the board, then made a simple developing move that shifted the energy of the game in a way only attentive viewers noticed. The commentators noticed. For the first time all night, their tone changed. This isn't just chess anymore, one whispered. The world leaned closer. The shift in tone from the commentators rippled instantly across the broadcast. Viewers who had been half watching leaned forward. Some muted their group chats, others turned up the volume. The commentators who had spent most of the match praising Viktor's dominance were suddenly careful with their words. Their voices grew slower, more deliberate, as if they sensed the narrative tilting in real time. Look at Keanu's formation, one commentator said. At first glance, it seems scattered, almost hesitant. But now, look at the coordination. Look at the tension he's building across the center. This isn't accidental. The second commentator nodded. It's almost artistic, as though he's weaving something. Every move looks soft, but the structure is tightening. I don't think Viktor expected this. The world reacted instantly. Memes that mocked Keanu froze mid-upload. New comments began to appear beneath the live stream. Comments from parents who recognized a quiet kind of resilience. Comments from teachers who saw patience where others saw weakness. Comments from children watching with grandparents who whispered that not every battle was loud. In Tokyo, a subway car filled with commuters slowed as passengers turned toward the overhead screens. Keanu's calm face glowed above them, a surreal image in the bright, crowded carriage. A few passengers gasped softly as they saw the position of the pieces. Even those who didn't understand chess sensed the tension, the way silence seemed to stretch across oceans. In Lagos, a group of university students huddled together over a laptop. They had opened the broadcast expecting entertainment. Instead, the room quieted as they watched Viktor fidget with his sleeve, a sign of irritation he usually kept hidden. One student whispered that Keanu played like someone who had known loss and learned to turn that loss into intention. Another nodded, saying the board looked like a story unfolding one move at a time. Meanwhile, back in Dubai, the arena vibrated with murmurs. Spectators who had laughed at Viktor's jokes earlier now exchanged uneasy glances. Something had shifted. Even Viktor noticed it. His fingers drummed lightly on the table as he stared at the pieces. He didn't understand why Keanu's loose, strange formation suddenly felt threatening. Keanu's face remained calm. He breathed steadily like a man remembering someone's advice. The camera caught a close-up of his eyes. There was no fear in them, only patience, only focus, only the echo of someone he had once loved showing him how to slow down the world piece by piece. One of the commentators spoke again. Notice how Viktor keeps pushing aggressively. It's his trademark, but Keanu isn't countering him directly. He's letting Viktor burn energy, letting him rush, letting him overextend. This is psychological chess. The second commentator exhaled, sounding almost emotional. You know, this feels bigger than the game. Like we're watching two lives collide across 64 squares. At that moment, thousands of viewers typed the same thought in different languages. This isn't about winning anymore. In a small apartment in Mumbai, an elderly grandmother sat cross-legged on the floor beside her grandson. The boy pointed excitedly at the screen, telling her that Keanu's knights were positioned strangely, that the bishops looked passive, that none of it made sense. The grandmother shook her head gently. She didn't know the rules well, but she understood human beings. Sometimes the quiet ones see what the loud ones miss, she told him. On the other side of the world, in a cramped upstairs bedroom in Dublin, a teenager paused his video game to watch the match on his phone. He had been bullied at school for being shy for not fighting back. As he watched Keanu sit with such stillness in the face of Viktor's cruelty, something inside him eased. He whispered to himself that maybe kindness didn't mean weakness. Maybe patience was a kind of strength no one taught in his school. By now, the commentators had fully abandoned their early dismissiveness. The lead analyst leaned forward with genuine awe. Keanu's position isn't random. It's controlled chaos. It's emotional chess. The phrase spread instantly across the internet. Emotional chess. People began repeating it, quoting it, turning it into a symbol of something they felt but couldn't explain. They sensed that the match had become a mirror reflecting two lives shaped by two very different kinds of pain. Viktor's pain came out as fire. Keanu's came out as stillness. Inside a diner in Vancouver, a couple who had just come off a late work shift watched the screen above the counter. The husband pointed at Viktor's expression and muttered that the champion looked rattled. The wife nodded slowly, saying Keanu reminded her of her father, who had survived hardship without ever raising his voice. Across timelines and cultures, countless viewers found pieces of themselves in the quiet man moving wooden pieces with steady hands. Then something subtle happened on the board. Keanu slid a pawn one square forward in a move so ordinary it would have gone unnoticed in any other match, but tonight it landed like a heartbeat. The commentators inhaled sharply. Viktor stared at the board, his eyes narrowing as he realized too late that the small, humble pawn had just activated a chain of pressure along the center that boxed in his queen. The arena fell silent. In living rooms, cafes, buses, university dorms, and crowded bars, people leaned closer to their screens. Something was shifting. Something was beginning. For the first time since the match started, Viktor Sokolov looked afraid. The air inside the Dubai arena settled into a strange, heavy quiet, as though the entire building sensed that something irreversible was coming. Viktor Sokolov narrowed his eyes at the board, trying to steady himself after the last sequence. Keanu Reeves sat opposite him, hands folded loosely, gaze soft but unwavering. For 21 moves, the match had unfolded like a slow-burning story, full of strange rhythms and unexpected turns. Now the 22nd move approached, and something in Keanu's posture changed. He reached out and placed two fingers on the crown of his queen. The commentators jolted upright in their seats. "Wait, what is he doing?" one whispered. The second commentator leaned closer to the monitor. No. He's not actually planning to move the queen forward. That square is a death trap. If he puts the queen there, Viktor takes it instantly. The first commentator exhaled sharply. If Keanu pushes that queen, he's about to lose everything. The murmurs from the crowd swelled into a wave of alarm. The queen was Keanu's strongest piece. Removing it would dismantle any hope of a comeback. Fans watching the live stream typed frantic messages. Some begged him not to do it. Others wondered aloud if he had miscalculated. A few trolls celebrated the coming disaster. But Keanu didn't flinch. His fingers rested on the queen for a long moment, almost as if he were remembering someone's advice, someone's sacrifice, someone whose presence lingered through every move he made. Then he lifted the piece with a steady hand and placed it forward into the square that everyone else feared. The queen stood exposed, offered freely. A collective gasp rushed across the world. In the arena, people stood up from their seats in shock. Online viewers clipped the moment instantly, sending it circulating in every language. Children watching with their families shouted at televisions. Adults pressed hands to their mouths. Even chess grandmasters posting live analysis hesitated, unable to understand the purpose of the move. The commentators spoke again, but this time with trembling voices. "He's sacrificing his queen," the first said. "No one does this, not without a plan we can't see." The second commentator sounded almost reverent. "Keanu Reeves just did the unthinkable." Viktor stared at the board. For a moment he seemed too stunned to move. His queen could take Keanu's instantly. It was a clean capture, a demolition of Keanu's position. There was no dilemma, no complication. Or, so Viktor thought. He snatched the queen off the board with a swift motion, slamming it onto the side tray. The crowd reacted, half cheering, half groaning. Viktor leaned back in his chair, triumphant. He muttered loudly enough for microphones to pick it up. Finally, the actor folds. Keanu didn't react. He simply breathed long and slow. Then he reached for his knight. A soft murmur rose from the spectators as Keanu placed the knight into a square that redirected every line of pressure on the board. The commentators squinted. Hold on, one whispered. "This changes everything." And far away in Uganda, Jamila Odanga whispered the same words to her grandmother. He set a trap. The tension in the arena felt almost physical now, as if the weight of silence pressed against every seat and every breath. Viktor leaned over the board, suddenly alert. He scanned the position again, his eyes darting across the squares with growing unease. The smug confidence he'd displayed only moments earlier began to fade. Something about Keanu's knight move unsettled him. The commentators rechecked their digital analysis boards, their voices lower, tighter. This isn't random," one finally said. "Look at Viktor's pieces. Despite being ahead in material, everything is cramped. His rooks aren't coordinated. His king is boxed in. Keanu's move just tightened that noose." The second commentator nodded slowly. "It's the beginning of a positional trap." And Viktor didn't see it because he was too focused on destroying Keanu's queen. Around the world, analysts, amateurs, children, grandparents, janitors, professors, and everyday viewers stared at the unfolding board. Even those who didn't know the rules sensed the shift. Something invisible had turned, something subtle, something powerful. Viktor tried to regain composure. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, wiped his palms against the table, then moved a bishop to relieve pressure. It was a defensive move, something he almost never resorted to this early in a game. Keanu responded instantly. Another quiet move, a rook sliding one square to the right. Not flashy, not aggressive, but it opened new pathways, revealing new possibilities, shifting the balance again. It was the kind of move that only made sense if one saw the entire board as a story, rather than a battle. Jamila whispered, "He's guiding the pieces like they're alive." Her grandmother nodded. He learned chess from someone who played with their heart, not their pride. Back in Dubai, Viktor's jaw tightened as he examined the position. He realized for the first time that he wasn't dictating the rhythm of the match anymore. He had walked into Keanu's tempo without noticing it. The board felt smaller. The possibilities felt narrower. He made another defensive move. Keanu answered calmly. "Move after. Move," the story repeated. Viktor pushed back. Keanu absorbed it. Viktor tried to strike. Keanu redirected. The world watched Viktor spiral into a web he didn't understand. Each quiet move from Keanu closed another exit, another square, another line of freedom. The commentators grew breathless. "This is incredible," one said. "Keanu is building a zugzwang." The word echoed through the arena, the live stream, social media, and living rooms around the world. Even those who had never heard the term before felt its weight. Zugzwang, a position where every move makes things worse, a trap made not through force, but through inevitability. The second commentator leaned back in awe. If Viktor moves anything at all. His position collapses. The cameras zoomed in on Viktor's face. For the first time in his career, the 5-time world champion looked frightened. The next move would decide everything. Viktor stared at the board as if it had turned against him. His breathing grew shallow. His fingers hovered above several pieces, but each time he reached for one, he pulled his hand back. Nothing worked. Every option he considered led to a worse position. Every possibility collapsed into another trap. It was as if Keanu had rewritten the architecture of the board, turning 64 squares into a maze with no exit. The commentators spoke in hushed tones. "This is it. This is a perfect zugzwang." Even grandmasters rarely create something this clean. What Keanu just did, it's historic. The crowd began to realize the magnitude of what they were seeing. Silence spread through the arena from front row to balcony seats. Even the cameras seemed to move more slowly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile electricity in the air. On screens across continents, viewers leaned in. Families watching together stopped mid-breath. People sitting alone felt goosebumps rise on their arms. Children whispered in awe. Adults whispered in disbelief, all waiting for Viktor to make a move that could not save him. Keanu sat completely still. His expression was gentle, almost compassionate, as if he didn't see an opponent collapsing, but a man carrying too much pain. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply waited, honoring the silence his stepfather once taught him to trust. At last, Viktor exhaled sharply and reached for a pawn. It was the least damaging move on the board, the only one that didn't lead to instant disaster. But even that small shift opened a diagonal Keanu had been shaping for the last 6 moves. Keanu responded instantly. A bishop glided forward, a simple move, a quiet move. The moment it landed, the board snapped into clarity. Lines of attack lit up like constellations. Pressure tightened from every direction. Viktor's king was caught in a cage made of his own choices. The commentators gasped. "That's it. The position is completely lost. He can't escape. Every square is poisoned. He's cornered. Not by force, but by grace." In Uganda, Jamila covered her mouth with her hands. Her grandmother whispered a prayer of gratitude, not for victory, but for understanding. "The man plays with memory," she said. "With love. That is why the board bends for him." Back in Dubai, Viktor's hands shook as he touched his king and realized he had nowhere left to run. The world watched a champion fall, not to arrogance or violence, but to the quiet strength of a man who carried every sacrifice ever made for him. And everyone knew the only way out now was surrender or grace. Viktor Sokolov did not move. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe for several long seconds. His eyes were locked on the board, as though it had suddenly revealed a truth he had spent his entire life trying not to see. The arena around him was so quiet, it felt suspended in time. 10,000 spectators leaned forward in their seats, waiting for something they couldn't fully name. The world watched Viktor's face tighten, then loosen, then tremble. His hands began to shake. It started slowly, just a faint tremor in his fingertips, then spread through his palms and up his wrists. He clenched them together, trying to stop it, trying to pull himself back into the armor he had worn his entire career. But the armor wouldn't come. Not this time. Not after the zugzwang that had unraveled him from the inside out. He looked up at Keanu. The crowd could see the moment their eyes met. Viktor's expression wasn't angry anymore. It wasn't mocking or proud or superior. It was frightened, lost, like he had just realized he was standing on hollow ground. He swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he whispered, Why didn't you destroy me when you could have? The question drifted across the stage, caught by the nearest microphone, and flowed through speakers into every corner of the arena. It wasn't defiant. It wasn't accusing. It was the voice of a man who had been waiting his whole life for someone to answer that question. Someone who would prove that the world wasn't as cruel as he feared. Keanu held his gaze gently. The camera zoomed in, but Keanu didn't shift uncomfortably. He didn't glance at the audience. He didn't hide. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, as though speaking only to Viktor, as though the whole world wasn't watching this quiet exchange between two men on opposite ends of the same story. Because someone once taught me, Keanu said softly, that the game isn't about who wins, it's about who we become. The words landed in the arena like light. They traveled through every row, past every spectator, through every headset worn by commentators, and into the hearts of millions watching around the world. People sitting at home felt tears rise before they could stop them. Parents held their children closer. Strangers watching in public spaces exchanged glances that said more than language ever could. Viktor's chest tightened, his shoulders curled inward, his lips trembled. He looked back at the board, then at his own shaking hands, then once more at Keanu, as though trying to reconcile the mercy he'd just been given with the cruelty he'd shown. Slowly, painfully, he pushed back his chair. He stood. His legs trembled so visibly that the nearest cameraman instinctively stepped forward, afraid he might fall. But Viktor didn't fall. He lifted his head, turned toward the audience, and forced himself to face the 10,000 people who had watched him mock, belittle, and attack the man who had just spared him. When he spoke, his voice cracked again. "I mocked you." He paused, breath shaking. "And you answered me with mercy." The silence that followed was absolute. The arena remained perfectly still, as if every person inside was afraid that even a breath might shatter the fragile moment unfolding before them. Viktor's confession hung in the air, heavy and trembling. He had never apologized publicly in his entire career. He had never admitted weakness. Yet here he stood, shoulders shaking, voice cracking as thousands of eyes watched a lifetime of armor fall away. He turned slowly toward Keanu, his expression stripped of ego and fury. He looked younger somehow, not in age, but in vulnerability, like a boy remembering what it felt like to be seen without judgment. For years, Viktor said quietly, "I believed respect had to be earned through fear, through dominance, through crushing anyone who came near my throne." He pressed a hand against his chest, fingers trembling over the fabric of his suit. "That belief came from my father. He taught me that the world only values strength, that gentleness is weakness, that compassion is foolish." He shook his head, eyes glistening. "But today, you taught me something he never did." Keanu did not move. He simply listened, letting Viktor speak at his own fragile pace. The camera zoomed in on Viktor's trembling jaw, the faint shimmer of tears forming at the corners of his eyes. Millions watched as a man who had built his reputation on cruelty began to unravel, not because he had been defeated, but because someone had chosen not to destroy him. "You saw me losing control," Viktor continued. "You saw my fear. You saw the ugliness I tried to hide behind mockery. And instead of punishing me," his voice broke again, "you gave me space to choose who I want to be." A whisper of emotion moved through the arena like wind. From the front row to the highest balcony, people felt something rising in their chests, something warm, something painful, something human. Even the commentators had fallen silent. No one wanted to interrupt what felt like a turning point in a man's life. Viktor looked back at the board, at the zugzwang that had trapped him. The shapes of his pieces appeared suddenly different to him, not as soldiers he had failed to command, but as symbols of the walls he had spent years building around himself. "I have spent my life fighting ghosts," he whispered. "I mocked you because I feared you. Not your skill, your calm, your kindness. I didn't know how to face someone who didn't want to destroy me." Keanu's expression softened even further. There was no triumph in his eyes, only compassion, something Viktor had rarely, if ever, received from another man. Viktor bowed his head slightly. "You honored me, more than I deserved." A few people in the audience wiped their eyes. Others held their breath, waiting for what would come next. And then Viktor lifted his gaze again, meeting Keanu's with a fragile sincerity the world had never seen from him before. Viktor stood trembling before the silent arena, as if the weight of his own history had finally caught up to him. For a long moment he didn't speak. His throat tightened. His breath came unevenly, and his eyes drifted away from Keanu toward the massive screen overhead. It showed the chessboard frozen in zugzwang, but Viktor wasn't seeing pieces anymore. He was seeing ghosts. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with something the world had never witnessed from Viktor Sokolov. "I wasn't always this man," he whispered. The crowd leaned forward, the sound of 10,000 seats creaking softly. The commentators didn't speak. Even the cameras seemed to hum more quietly, as if bending toward a story that had been locked away for decades. "I grew up in Novosibirsk," Viktor said, "a place where winter wasn't a season. It was a presence. It was something you fought every day just to survive." He lowered his head slightly, remembering. "Our apartment was small, drafty. My father worked in the mines to keep us warm. My mother sewed clothes for the local market. We didn't have much, but we had each other." His voice cracked. He didn't try to hide it. "My father loved chess. Not because he was good at it. He wasn't. He loved it because it was the only thing that made him slow down. He used to sit with me after work, hands still shaking from the cold, and place the pieces gently like they were alive." Viktor paused, swallowing hard. "One winter he came home without his coat. I thought he'd lost it. I was angry at him. I yelled. I didn't understand." A tear slipped down Viktor's cheek, catching the light before falling to the stage. He hadn't lost it. Viktor continued. "He sold it. He used the money to buy me a chess set, a real wooden one, the kind he knew I dreamed about." He covered his face briefly, shoulders shaking as he forced the words out. "It was the last gift he ever gave me." Somewhere in the arena, someone gasped softly. Another wiped their eyes. These were strangers from every corner of the world. Yet Viktor's pain settled inside each of them. "My father died in a mine collapse." 2 weeks later, Viktor said, his voice a broken whisper. He froze, helping the younger men escape. They said he didn't hesitate, that he was calm, that he smiled at them. He looked up at the ceiling as though searching for his father somewhere in the lights. "I never got to tell him thank you." Keanu's eyes softened, but he didn't interrupt. Viktor continued. "After he died, my mother and I held on to that chess set like it was a piece of him. Then the fire happened. Our building burned. And the board, he gave me the last thing of his I had." His voice broke again. It turned to ash. He bowed his head, tears falling freely now. "And that's the day I promised myself I would become the greatest. I would win every match. I would conquer every opponent. I would never be weak enough to lose anything again." He closed his eyes, letting the truth settle in the silence. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was doing it for." Viktor wiped at his eyes, but the tears kept coming. They were not the controlled tears of an athlete managing disappointment. They were the tears of a man who had finally stopped running from a past that had shaped him more than any trophy ever had. "When my father died," Viktor said, voice trembling, "everyone told me to be strong, to be like him, to be unbreakable. They didn't understand that he wasn't strong because he was fierce. He was strong because he cared, because he loved gently, even when life wasn't gentle with him." He pressed a hand to his chest. "I forgot that part." The crowd listened in a reverent hush, as if afraid that interrupting would force the moment to disappear. Cameras captured every flicker of emotion on Viktor's face. Millions watching around the world felt their hearts tighten with a tenderness they didn't expect to feel toward a man who had entered this match with cruelty. "When I became champion," Viktor continued, "people praised my aggression. They praised how I crushed my opponents. They said I played like a warrior, like a machine built to win." He shook his head slowly. "But they didn't know the truth. I wasn't playing to win. I was playing to fill a hole inside me. A hole left by a man who gave everything, even his coat, so I could play a game he barely understood. Viktor took an unsteady breath. I told myself I needed to be the best, that if I reached the top, the emptiness would disappear. But the higher I climbed, the more I lost pieces of myself. I stopped smiling. I stopped caring about people. I stopped caring about the beauty of the game my father loved. His voice softened even further. Instead, I became the worst version of him. The version I imagined existed if he had been cruel. I mocked opponents. I belittled them. I used fear the way I thought champions had to. He lifted his head, eyes red, jaw trembling. And today, standing across from someone who refused to return my cruelty, I finally saw myself clearly. Keanu remained still, his presence steady and calming, as though offering Viktor a place to stand that wasn't built on shame. I forgot my father's warmth, Viktor whispered. I forgot the reason he gave me that board. He didn't want me to win, he wanted me to grow, to become someone better than the world allowed him to be. The silence deepened. It wasn't emptiness, it was compassion moving through the arena like a tide. People who had never heard Viktor speak more than a few sharp sentences now hung on every word. Viktor pressed both hands against the table to steady himself. And when I realized that, I broke. His voice cracked again, raw and unguarded. I broke because I saw the man I could have been, the man he hoped I would become, and the man I turned into instead. For several long seconds, neither man moved. Viktor stood with his shoulders shaking, tears falling freely, his confession still hanging in the air. The world watched a man who had been feared for years, a champion built on intimidation, finally allow himself to be human. And across from him, Keanu Reeves rose slowly from his chair. He didn't rush. He didn't make a dramatic gesture. He simply walked toward Viktor with the quiet presence that had defined him since the beginning of the match. The arena remained silent, breathing as one as Keanu crossed the small distance between them. When he reached Viktor, Keanu opened his arms and pulled him gently into a hug. It was not the kind of embrace meant for cameras or applause. It was the embrace of someone who understood pain, someone who recognized the moment when another person reached their breaking point. Keanu held Viktor firmly but gently, as though grounding him, giving him a place to stand when his own legs were unsteady. Viktor clung to him, not like a rival, not like a defeated champion, like a man holding on to the first real kindness he had been given in years. The crowd erupted not with cheers, but with the sound of thousands of people crying openly. Some covered their mouths, others held on to the strangers beside them. In homes and cafes around the world, people paused the live stream to wipe tears from their faces. Keanu didn't release Viktor until he felt the man's trembling begin to settle. When he finally stepped back, he kept one hand on Viktor's shoulder, steadying him. My father wasn't rich either, Keanu said softly, voice carrying through the arena. He worked 3 jobs so I could dream. The words hit the audience with the force of truth. They weren't rehearsed. They weren't crafted for sympathy. They came from somewhere deep inside him, from the memory of a man who had given everything he could, despite having very little. Keanu glanced at the chessboard, then at the cameras, then back at Viktor. His expression was calm, but filled with emotion. I understand what it means to lose someone, he continued. And I understand what it means to carry their love with you, even when it hurts. Viktor's eyes filled again, and he bowed his head. Keanu took a small step forward and addressed not just Viktor, but the entire world watching. We don't play this game to crush each other. We don't win by humiliation. We win by honoring the people who made us, the ones who believed in us before anyone else did. His voice grew steadier, though still gentle. My father taught me that competition doesn't have to create enemies. It can bring out the best in us. It can remind us of who we want to be. The arena was silent again, but this time it was a peaceful silence, a warm one. Keanu turned slightly toward the audience. So let's make this game about honoring those who made us, he said, not humiliating those who need healing. A ripple of emotion moved through the crowd like a wave. Grown men cried openly. Women pressed hands to their hearts. Children held their parents' hands, tightly sensing the importance of the moment, even if they didn't fully understand it. The commentators spoke in choked voices. This match is no longer about chess. It's become something much bigger." Keanu placed his hand gently on Viktor's back. "And if today means anything," he added softly, "let it remind us that grace is stronger than victory." Viktor closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks again. And around the world, millions of viewers felt their hearts shift. The match was no longer about checkmate. It was about transformation. Keanu's words lingered in the air long after he finished speaking. They were simple, but they carried the weight of experience. Not the experience of trophies or fame, but the experience of loss, resilience, and love. People in the audience felt those words settle into their hearts, warming places they didn't realize had grown cold. Viktor lifted his head slowly, still trembling. His eyes were red, his breath uneven, but something in his expression had changed. It was as though the harsh lines carved by years of pressure and isolation had softened. He looked at Keanu, not as an opponent, but as someone offering him a way back to the parts of himself he thought he had lost forever. "I forgot what it meant to play with heart," Viktor whispered. "Somewhere along the way, I traded joy for fear. I traded gratitude for pride." Keanu nodded gently. "We've all lost ourselves at times. What matters is whether we find our way back." Those words struck Viktor with bittersweet clarity. He hadn't expected forgiveness. He certainly hadn't expected understanding, and yet here it was offered freely, without hesitation. The audience felt the shift too. What had begun as a high-stakes chess match between a world champion and a Hollywood icon had turned into something deeper, something profoundly human. Strangers held hands. Others quietly wiped away tears. Even the security staff along the walls softened their posture, realizing they were witnessing a moment people would talk about for decades. Viktor inhaled shakily. "Your father must have been proud of you." Keanu's eyes glistened. "I hope so. He didn't have much, but he gave me everything that mattered." He looked toward the crowd again, his voice growing stronger. "We're all shaped by the people who came before us, the people who sacrificed so we could sit here, breathe here, dream here. Let's honor them with the way we treat each other." People nodded, tears running freely. Across the globe, viewers typed messages about their parents, grandparents, and mentors, people who had lifted them up when no one else did. Keanu's message reached them too. It wasn't just about chess or competition, it was about memory, legacy, humanity. Then Keanu looked back at Viktor. "This match doesn't need a victor," he said gently. "It needs meaning." Viktor felt his breath catch in his throat. And for the first time in his life, he believed it. Viktor was still wiping tears from his face when Keanu stepped forward again. The arena lights shifted, dimming softly as the giant screens behind them came to life. The audience leaned in. Everyone could sense something was coming, but no one knew what. Keanu took a slow breath, steadying his voice. It was calm, warm, and steady, the kind of voice people instinctively trusted. "There's something I haven't told you," Keanu said. "Something I've been preparing long before this match began." The arena went silent again. Even Viktor straightened, uncertain but alert. Keanu reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small wooden box. It was old, worn, and scarred by time. A faint ripple spread through the audience as he opened it gently. Inside, cushioned in soft cloth, was a chess queen carved from dark birch wood. Its edges were scorched, its base uneven. It looked fragile, like something pulled out of a forgotten memory. Viktor froze, his breath caught. His eyes widened with disbelief. "This," Keanu said softly, "was found in the ruins of your old home." People gasped. Viktor stumbled backward, his hand covering his mouth. The commentators didn't speak. The cameras zoomed in, catching every tremor in Viktor's expression. Keanu continued, "Your childhood chessboard didn't burn completely. Some fragments survived, pieces so damaged that most people thought they were useless. but someone who cared enough spent months restoring what they could. The screen behind them shifted. A new image appeared. Viktor's mother, older now gray hair pulled back into a neat bun, sitting in a brightly lit living room that looked nothing like the harsh Siberian apartment she once endured. Her hands were pressed to her lips. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks. "My boy," she whispered through the broadcast. "My boy is back." The audience erupted in gasps, murmurs, hands covering hearts. Viktor sank into his chair. He looked between the screen and the wooden piece in Keanu's hand, overwhelmed beyond words. His chest rose and fell quickly, like he was trying to breathe through years of buried emotion. Keanu stepped closer to him. "I bought her a home," he said quietly. "Somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere she can finally rest." Viktor trembled. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Keanu's voice softened even more. "Your father sacrificed everything for you. Your mother continued that sacrifice. They deserve peace. And you deserve to know that their love wasn't forgotten." The screen changed again. Now it showed a craftsman's workshop, a man carefully sanding wood, another painting delicate burn marks to match the original pattern. Then the finished board rebuilt from the fire-blackened remains of Viktor's childhood set. A replica, yet not a replica at all. A resurrection. Viktor pressed his hands to his face. His shoulders shook. For the first time in his adult life, the world saw him not as a champion, not as a ruthless competitor, but as a son. Keanu placed the restored queen gently into Viktor's open hands. "This belongs to you," he said, "and so does the meaning behind it." Viktor held the restored queen as though it were alive. His fingers traced the small ridges, the faint burn marks, the imperfections that once belonged to a moment in time he thought was lost forever. The lights in the arena reflected off the polished surface, making it glow softly in his hands. He whispered a single word. "Papa." Keanu stood beside him without saying anything more. He understood the weight of memory, the ache of love that outlives people, and the silence that comes after years of trying to forget. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The audience didn't either. It felt as if the entire world had stopped its breath to give Viktor space to feel. Finally, Viktor looked up at the screen where his mother appeared again. Her eyes were filled with pride, not for victories, not for trophies, but for her son standing vulnerable and human before millions. "My boy," she whispered again, "your father would be so proud." The words broke him. Viktor pressed the wooden queen against his chest, shaking with quiet sobs. All the armor he had worn, arrogance, cruelty, mockery, fell away in seconds. He was no longer the man who belittled Keanu during press conferences, who laughed at him for being an actor, who sneered at anyone he saw as weaker. He was simply a child remembering love. Keanu waited until Viktor's breathing steadied. Then he addressed the crowd, his voice rising in that gentle, calm way that made people lean closer rather than pull back. This match was never about proving strength, Keanu said. It was never about showing who could win or who could crush someone else under pressure. Viktor lifted his face, listening. It was about remembering where we come from, the people who shaped us, the sacrifices that gave us a chance. The arena lights softened. The screens showed images of parents worldwide helping their children with schoolwork, packing lunches, staying up late, sewing clothes, working overtime, shifts holding their kids through storms, fathers in factories, mothers in rural villages, grandparents raising grandchildren. The world wasn't just watching a chess match anymore. It was witnessing a story every person recognized. Keanu continued, "That's why I did something else. Something I hope honors not just Viktor's parents, but every parent who ever gave more than they had." The crowd leaned forward. Even the commentators fell silent. Keanu looked at Viktor directly. "I've created something new. Something for children like you and me. Children who grew up without money but with someone who believed in them." Viktor's breathing hitched. He gripped the restored queen tightly, as if holding on to the past and the future at the same time. Keanu stepped to the center of the stage. Today marks the beginning of a global project, a project built not on winning but on gratitude, not on humiliation but on healing. The big screens flashed to black. A single line of text appeared glowing in soft white, the Quiet Sacrifice Foundation. A hush fell over the entire arena. People stared, confused, moved, waiting. Keanu finally spoke again, his voice calm and certain. It's time we honor every sacrifice, quiet or unseen, that made us who we are. In the middle of the global broadcast, just after the announcement of the Quiet Sacrifice Foundation, the screen behind Keanu faded into a live video feed. The location was unmistakable to millions who had watched Jamila appear earlier in the pre-show audience reactions. A small village in eastern Uganda with red earth paths and tin-roofed houses shining under the warm afternoon sun. The camera focused on a modest home made of clay walls and worn wooden beams. Outside, under the shade of a mango tree, sat Jamila Odanga. She was 16, bright-eyed sharp, and remarkably observant. She held a small cloth bag, and inside it were 12 stones of different shapes. They weren't just stones, they were her chess pieces. The ones her mother had once arranged carefully on the ground night after night, teaching her openings and strategy using nothing but imagination. The moment the broadcast switched to her village, Jamila froze. For a second, she thought it was a mistake. She looked at her mother, Amina, who stood by the doorway with a basket of laundry in her arms. Amina tilted her head in confusion, then recognition flashed across her face. Her hands trembled. The laundry fell to the ground. "Jamila," she whispered, "they are showing our home." The villagers began gathering around them. Children whispered. Adults covered their mouths with their hands. The entire world was watching their tiny village, but none of them knew why. Not yet. Back in Dubai, the host standing near Keanu announced the next revelation. "We have chosen our first youth leader for the Quiet Sacrifice Foundation, a young thinker whose insight helped millions understand the strategy unfolding on the board today." Jamila blinked. Her heart raced. She whispered to her mother, "No, it can't be me." The host continued, "She is a girl who saw the truth before any commentator did. A girl who recognized the heart behind Keanu Reeves' playstyle. A girl who said, 'He's setting a trap.'" Gasps rippled through the village crowd. The camera zoomed in on Jamila. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled up instantly. The children around them began cheering, shouting her name, pulling her closer so she wouldn't faint from shock. Jamila simply stared at the screen, wide-eyed, speechless. The host smiled. "Jamila Odanga of Uganda, Keanu Reeves has invited you to join him as a co-leader of the foundation." The world erupted. Social media exploded with her name. Comment threads filled with heart emojis and applause. Celebrities reposted the clip within seconds. Viewers around the world, kids, parents, teachers, felt their hearts lift at the sight of a young girl from a remote village suddenly being recognized by one of the most beloved figures on earth. Jamila couldn't speak. She pressed her palms to her face, shaking. "Mama, they want me. Me." Her mother touched her daughter's cheeks. "You earned this," she whispered. "Your mind did this. Your heart did this. Your papa would be so proud." The words hit Jamila deeper than anything else. Her father had died when she was 9. He had taught her resilience. Her mother had taught her chess, and now somehow the world had seen her. The host continued speaking, but Jamila barely heard anything. Her entire future had just shifted in a single breath. The announcer's voice returned as the Dubai arena displayed Jamila's stunned expression on every massive screen. The world watched her wipe her tears, overwhelmed, yet radiant, as Keanu stepped forward to speak again. "She saw the truth in a game that was hiding its heart," Keanu said. "She understood that strategy without compassion is empty. Her insight reminded us what this foundation is about: hope, opportunity, and honoring where we come from. His tone was calm, but it carried power. The arena hushed. Jamila, he continued, looking directly into the camera. I want you to help lead this movement. Your voice matters, your perspective matters, and your story matters. Jamila clutched her stone pieces tighter. She didn't know what to say. She didn't even know if she should stand or sit. Tears kept slipping down her cheeks, and her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steadying her. A moment later, another surprise appeared on the screen. A drone camera swooped through her village and paused in front of a brand new house on a nearby hill. It was painted cream with a green metal roof, large windows, a sturdy wooden door, and a veranda shaded by fresh timber beams. It seemed impossibly modern compared to the rest of the village. The host lifted a hand dramatically. And this, he said, is for her mother, Amina Odanga, who taught her daughter chess using stones because they could not afford a board. The village gasped collectively. People clapped their hands over their mouths. Children screamed in joy and ran toward the hill. Amina staggered backward, overwhelmed. She whispered, "No, no, this cannot be for us." Keanu's voice came through clearly. "It is yours, a gift of gratitude, a place where you and Jamila can rest, dream, and continue the legacy you built with love." Amina pressed her forehead to her daughter's. "My child," she said, tears streaming, "we have a home, a real home." Jamila sobbed openly now. Her neighbors hugged her. Some lifted her up in celebration. Others cried as if it were happening to their own daughters. Hope, so rare and fragile in many of their lives, had just arrived like a sunrise. The drone camera followed the crowd up the hill as they approached the house. The new door swung open, revealing furniture, bookshelves, a study table, and a real wooden chessboard waiting on a polished desk. Amina nearly fell to her knees. She reached out to touch the board, her fingers trembling. "I never thought I would see this," she whispered. "I never thought." Jamila hugged her from behind. "Mama, I want to learn everything. I want to teach others. I want to help the foundation grow." Her mother turned and held her. "You will, my love. You already changed the world once." 6 months later, the world felt different. The story of Keanu Reeves' Viktor Sokolov and a quiet girl from Uganda had traveled across continents and languages, settling into the hearts of millions. Now, in the heart of Nairobi, the first Quiet Sacrifice Chess Invitational was about to begin. It wasn't just a tournament, it was the birth of a global movement. The Kenyatta International Convention Center had been transformed in ways the city had never seen before. Flags from 60 countries swayed gently from the ceiling. Rows of polished wooden chessboards lined the floor. Bright banners decorated the hall, each one carrying a portrait of a child who had traveled from far away to be here. Some had crossed oceans. Some had flown for the very first time. Some had never left their hometowns until this day. 100 children, each representing a story of sacrifice. 100 dreams carved from resilience. 100 lives about to change. The doors opened, and the participants walked in wearing simple white shirts printed with the foundation's emblem. Their families followed behind them, some dressed in colorful traditional attire, others in carefully ironed clothes they saved for special occasions. The air buzzed with excitement, nerves, and gratitude. Keanu Reeves sat in the front row, not as a celebrity, but as a quiet observer. Beside him sat Viktor Sokolov, no longer the stern champion the world once feared. He looked rested, softer, human. He wore a charcoal gray jacket and held the restored chess queen in his hands, turning it slowly between his fingers, as though it grounded him in a way nothing else could. At one point, Viktor leaned over and whispered to Keanu, "I never imagined this. Children from everywhere, all because of one match." Keanu smiled gently. "It was never just a match." Viktor nodded, his eyes softening. "No, it was a reminder." The lights dimmed and a spotlight illuminated the stage. A hush fell over the hall. Every child stood still. Every parent held their breath. Jamila Odanga walked onto the stage. Now 17, she carried herself with a calm confidence that made the room grow silent in admiration. She wore a long blue dress, simple yet elegant, and around her neck hung a wooden pendant carved in the shape of a chess knight. a gift from her mother, a reminder of where her journey began. As she reached the podium, the audience rose to its feet in applause. Cameras flashed, journalists leaned forward, children looked up at her, wide-eyed, inspired. Jamila took a deep breath. She glanced toward the front row, where Keanu and Viktor sat side by side. They nodded at her, encouraging, proud. She smiled softly, then faced the crowd. She began to speak, her voice steady but warm. "I play not to win," she said. "I play to remember." The words echoed through the hall. She continued, "I remember the nights my mother drew a chessboard in the dirt. I remember using stones as pieces. I remember the times we lost everything except hope. And I remember the moment the world saw me, not as a poor girl from Uganda, but as someone with something to give." Parents wiped their eyes. Children sat straighter. Even Viktor pressed his lips together, tightly, moved more than he expected. Jamila placed both hands on the podium and looked around the hall. This tournament is not about defeating each other. It is about honoring the people who helped us get here. The parents who worked overtime, the grandparents who taught us, the neighbors who believed in us, the sacrifices that shaped us. The crowd listened in complete stillness. And today, she said, we celebrate every one of them. Jamila stepped away from the podium and motioned toward the first row of children seated near the stage. They stood, one by one, holding small photographs of the people who had carried them through hardship. A boy from Bolivia held up a picture of his grandmother, who raised him alone while working in a salt mine. A girl from Jordan raised a faded snapshot of her father, repairing shoes on a dusty street. A child from Vietnam held a picture of an older brother who sacrificed his college dreams so she could stay in school. Jamila's eyes shimmered as she looked at them. "These are our heroes," she said. "This tournament is their story too." The hall filled with applause that sounded less like cheering and more like gratitude released into the air. Keanu's chest tightened as he watched. It reminded him of the quiet sacrifices his own stepfather had made long ago. He could almost feel the warmth of that tiny LA apartment again, hear the soft clicking of wooden chess pieces between them. Viktor lowered his head. The image of his father came rushing back, the freezing cold of Novosibirsk, the way the old man had wrapped his coat around Viktor's small body, the way he had pressed the burned chess set into his hands with pride. Viktor squeezed the restored queen gently. It anchored him to something he thought he had lost long ago. Jamila signaled for the lights to rise. A spotlight swept across the stage, revealing the rows of polished boards and the beaming faces of the children who would compete. "Today," she said, "we begin a new tradition. Every one of you will play with honor. Every move will carry a memory. Every game will shine with the love of the people who made you who you are." She paused, then smiled. "And no matter who wins, every child here receives a scholarship. Every family receives support. And every story receives a voice." The arena erupted again. Families embraced. Some children wept quietly. Others stood tall, holding their chins high with pride. Jamila raised her hand for silence. "Before we begin, I want to ask our honored guests to join me." Keanu and Viktor exchanged a glance. Then they rose together and walked onto the stage. A gentle wave of awe moved through the hall. Cameras flashed. Children whispered to one another as the two men approached Jamila. Keanu placed a hand over his heart. Viktor did the same. Their gestures were simple, but the meaning resonated. Jamila nodded gratefully. These two men showed the world that compassion is stronger than humiliation, that mercy can change a life, and that a game can become a message. Keanu stepped forward. "Jamila," he said quietly, "it's your moment now. Lead them well." She smiled, steady and confident. "I will." By the third day of the Quiet Sacrifice Chess Invitational, the atmosphere inside the Nairobi Hall felt electric. Children from 60 countries had played their hearts out, each move shaped by memory, sacrifice, and hope. Parents sat on the edges of their seats, some whispering prayers, others gripping worn photographs of loved ones who had pushed them this far. The energy in the room suggested something extraordinary was about to happen. When the final pairing was announced, Even the commentators paused in surprise. One of the finalists was a quiet 11-year-old girl from Appalachia, West Virginia. Her name was Lily Mae Carter. She had wide hazel eyes, freckles across her nose, and long hair tied back with a simple blue ribbon. She looked small against the backdrop of flags and cameras, but her presence somehow filled the space with an unexpected calm. Her opponent was a confident 13-year-old boy from South Korea who had trained in elite academies. He approached the board with polished precision, bowing respectfully to Lily Mae. She nodded shyly, placing her hand over her heart, the way her father taught her back home. In the front row, Keanu and Viktor watched closely. Viktor leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "She plays with instinct," he whispered. "Beautiful, raw instinct." Keanu nodded, and something deeper. Lily Mae's story had touched many in the days leading up to the final. Her father, a long-haul trucker named Bill Carter, had worked himself to exhaustion, raising her alone. He didn't have much, but he had given her everything he could. When Lily Mae showed interest in chess at age 7, he sold the only valuable thing he owned, his old country guitar, to buy her a wooden chess set from a pawn shop. It wasn't fancy. Some of the pieces were chipped, and the board had scratches from years of use. But to her, it was as precious as gold. Tonight, that same set sat displayed near the stage, a symbol of love, a symbol of sacrifice. The match began quietly. Lily Mae played white. Her small fingers hovered over the pieces. Before each move, her eyes focused with a seriousness that seemed far beyond her age. The boy from South Korea opened aggressively, pushing his pawns hard toward the center. Gasps echoed through the hall as he launched an early attack. But Lily Mae didn't panic. She breathed slowly, her lips pressed together, studying the board without rushing. Then she made a move that caught even the commentators off guard. She sacrificed a bishop to open a diagonal no one expected. The hall filled with murmurs. In the front row, Viktor sat up straighter. "That's bold," he said softly. "And brilliant." Keanu smiled faintly. "She's not afraid to lose something small to gain something meaningful. She reminds me of someone." The match unfolded like a story without words. The South Korean boy kept pressing forward, but Lily Mae's quiet persistence shaped the board into a landscape of unexpected traps and hidden intentions. Every piece she moved seemed to honor someone unseen, someone watching from far away. When the audience cameras cut briefly to the crowd, they found her father standing in the back of the hall. He wore worn jeans, a faded trucker jacket, and an expression of awe. The man who had driven across the ocean, his first time on a plane, just to witness this moment. His eyes glistened as he watched his daughter fight on the world stage with nothing but heart. And the world watched with him. As the game reached its middle phase, something shifted. The confident boy from South Korea began to slow down, his brows furrowed. His hand hovered over a rook, then retreated. He leaned back, exhaling sharply. Lily Mae wasn't just defending. She was rewriting the rhythm of the match. She made a subtle knight maneuver, then another. Each move drew him into tighter lines, restricting his choices little by little. What looked simple at first began revealing a deeper intention. She was steering the game into a quiet storm. Commentator whispers rippled across the venue and through global live streams. Where did she learn this? How does an 11-year-old see patterns like that? "It's instinct," someone said. "Pure instinct." Lily Mae made another soft move, placing her queen on a seemingly harmless square. Her opponent hesitated. He examined the board again. Then he realized too late. The room gasped. Her queen wasn't wandering. It was waiting. Within 3 moves, she trapped his king. A perfect sequence. Clean, elegant, devastating. Checkmate. The hall exploded in cheers. Children jumped from their seats. Parents covered their mouths. Flags swayed as journalists scrambled to capture the moment. Even the South Korean boy, stunned but gracious, stood and bowed deeply to her. Lily Mae stared at the board, unsure if she should believe what just happened. Then she turned toward her father at the back of the hall. He burst into tears, instantly dropping to his knees as his hands covered his face. Several volunteers ran to him, lifting him up so he wouldn't collapse entirely. Viktor rose from his seat, clapping with heartfelt admiration. "A masterpiece," he said. "She played with memory, not ambition." Keanu watched the young girl walk slowly toward the front of the stage, where she was being ushered for the winner's announcement. Her small frame looked even smaller in the bright lights, but her presence, steady, brave, humble, commanded the entire world. Jamila stepped onto the stage beside her, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "You earned this," she whispered. "Your father's sacrifice lives in every move you made." The crowd quieted as Keanu approached from the other side of the stage. Children leaned over railings to see him. Cameras zoomed in. The light softened. Lily Mae lifted her gaze to him, trembling slightly. Her eyes glowed with something fragile and strong at the same time. Keanu knelt down in front of her so he would not tower over her. The noise of the arena softened, almost fading away. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the room. In the months following the quiet sacrifice, Chess Invitational, something extraordinary, began to ripple across the globe. It didn't arrive like a storm or an explosion. It didn't roar. It spread the way dawn does across a quiet horizon, softly, steadily illuminating everything in its path. What Keanu, Viktor, Jamila, and the children had started was no longer just a foundation. It had become a movement carried not by fame or spectacle, but by stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things for the ones they loved. In orphanages across Eastern Europe, volunteers brought simple wooden boards and mismatched pieces. Children who had known only instability now sat in circles, leaning over the squares with glowing eyes. They studied the patterns with the seriousness of scholars twice their age. A boy in Bucharest who had once refused to speak after losing both his parents suddenly found comfort in explaining the moves to younger kids. "The night jumps because sometimes life jumps," he said softly. The caregivers wiped tears from their eyes. Something was healing in him. In a refugee camp in Jordan, tents, lined up like fragile promises, stood under blistering sun. A volunteer unfolded a piece of cardboard and drew a chess grid with a black marker. Dozens of children gathered around. Some wore worn sandals, some had bare feet, toughened by heat and dust. All of them watched intently as a teenage girl demonstrated how to move the rook. When she finished, a small boy raised his hand and asked, "Can the pieces protect each other?" She smiled. "That's the whole point." In a mountain village in Vietnam, far from the noise of cities, a young boy named Min crouched beside an old wooden crate. He arranged bottle caps he had collected from roadside markets, white caps for one side, blue caps for the other. His grandmother watched from the doorway, her back bent, but her spirit strong. Min looked up at her and asked gently, "Ba Noi, would you like to learn?" She hesitated, then nodded, and with patience beyond his years, he taught her how each piece moved. Every time she made a correct move, he clapped softly with pride. Thousands of miles away in rural Pennsylvania, an Amish girl named Eliza took out a handmade board crafted by her grandfather. She sat beside her aging grandmother, whose hands trembled from arthritis. Slowly, carefully, Eliza guided her through an opening. "Patience," she whispered, "is the strongest move." The grandmother smiled, remembering a time long gone, and leaned closer to study the pieces with newfound determination. Across continents, across cultures, across languages, the message was the same. Chess had become a language of healing. Children who had once felt invisible now felt seen. Parents who had struggled in silence now felt honored. Grandparents who feared being forgotten now found themselves teaching lessons that would outlive them. And through it all, through every story that traveled back to the Foundation's headquarters, one person remained consistently quiet, always stepping aside when the cameras tried to center him. Keanu Reeves. He attended meetings but sat in the back. He visited communities but insisted on no publicity. He watched the movement grow, not with pride, but with humility, as though he were simply tending a garden planted by someone else. Inside the Foundation's central hall stood a single glass case. Visitors often paused in front of it, some whispering, some placing a hand on their heart. Inside the case rested his father's old handmade chessboard, the one burned at the edges, the one that had survived a fire and a childhood of hardship. Below it, engraved into a simple plaque, were the words in memory of those who gave us everything. The foundation headquarters in Nairobi became a crossroads where stories from around the world converged. Every week, letters arrived in thick bundles covered in stamps from places many staff members had never visited. Some envelopes were bent from long travel, some carried children's drawings, and some contained moving testimonies that left even the most seasoned volunteers in tears. One letter came from a single mother in Detroit. She worked nights at a nursing home, slept in short bursts during the day, and struggled to provide for her son. She wrote that her boy found a used chessboard at a thrift store cracked along the edges. When she came home after her shift, she would find him asleep with the board beside him, pieces still set mid-game. He says it helps him think, she wrote, helps him feel safe. Thank you for making him believe his mind matters. Another letter arrived from a small island in the Philippines. A group of children had watched the Invitational on a shared smartphone while balancing on fishing boats. They had learned the rules from Jamila's online tutorials, which she recorded weekly from her new study corner. We don't have boards, one child wrote, but we draw them in the sand. When the tide washes it away, we draw it again. We don't give up. And in Chile, deep in the mining towns, where families worked grueling hours beneath the earth, a father wrote that he had started a small nighttime chess club for the miners' children. He described how it became a place where kids could forget the fear of losing their parents to dangerous shifts. When they play, he wrote, they breathe easier. These letters became the heartbeat of the foundation, and through them all, one figure rose quietly into global recognition: Jamila Odanga. She never sought the spotlight. She preferred simple clothes and long hours of work. But people gravitated to her calm clarity, her kindness, and her unwavering belief that the next generation deserved to feel seen. She traveled from country to country, meeting children who dreamed the same way she once had. Her speeches were replayed in classrooms. Interviews with her reached millions. Young girls braided their hair like hers and carried notebooks filled with her quotes. Journalists called her a guiding star. Teachers called her a living lesson. Children called her Sister Jamila. Still, whenever praise flooded toward her, she redirected it gently. "This is not about me," she always said. "This is about all of us who were lifted by someone who loved us." Meanwhile, Viktor found new purpose, traveling to remote regions of Russia, bringing chessboards to schools that could not afford them. He spoke openly about his father, about grief, about rediscovery. He told children that winning felt hollow until he learned to share victory with others. His voice, once sharp with arrogance, was now soft with gratitude. As for Keanu, he watched all of this unfold from behind the scenes. He smiled when letters came in. He nodded when Jamila spoke during meetings. But whenever someone thanked him directly, he stepped out of the light and pointed to the glass case. "Don't thank me," he said softly. "Thank the ones who taught us how to love." Even as the quiet sacrifice foundation spread across continents, touching lives through classrooms, refugee camps, mountain villages, and crowded cities, Keanu Reeves often found himself retreating to the same quiet place where everything made sense again. A small park just outside the Foundation's Nairobi headquarters. It wasn't grand or famous. It didn't have plaques or statues. It was just a patch of soft grass beneath an old acacia tree overlooking a narrow walking path and a still pond. Keanu visited late in the evening when the sky turned deep blue and the city softened into distant hums. He carried nothing with him except the chessboard his stepfather had once repaired by hand. The wood was dark and worn, the edges slightly warped from the fire years ago, and the pieces were smoothed by time and love. It wasn't beautiful in the way modern sets were, but it carried the weight of memory. It carried the story of where he came from. Tonight, he settled onto the park bench, slowly letting the quiet wrap itself around him. Fireflies flickered near the grass. A soft breeze rustled the branches. Across the pond, the lights of the city twinkled like scattered embers. He opened the board and placed each piece gently as though greeting old friends. His stepfather once told him that a chessboard was a world, not just of strategy, but of choices. Choices that revealed who you were long before they revealed whether you won. Keanu paused with a small smile, remembering how his stepfather laughed whenever he blundered a move, patting him on the shoulder with gentle reassurance. "It's not about perfection," he used to say. "It's about trying again." He picked up a single pawn now, the smallest piece on the board, the one most overlooked. He held it between his fingers, letting its familiar weight settle into his hand. "For you, Dad," he whispered. His voice was soft, nearly swallowed by the night air. He placed the pawn on the board with a delicate tap. It wasn't a grand move or a dramatic one. It wasn't meant to win or to impress. It was a beginning, a reminder, a tribute, a quiet thank you to the man who had shaped him without ever expecting recognition. Keanu leaned back on the bench and looked toward the sky. The stars emerged slowly above him, scattered across the darkening canvas. He imagined his stepfather somewhere in that silent glow, watching with the same calm patience he showed during every lesson, every moment of guidance, every sacrifice that never made the news, but forever shaped a life. Around him, the world felt still, peaceful, honest. He exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the foundation, the children, the stories, and the future settle in his heart. He didn't care that the world credited him as the founder. He didn't care that millions saw him as a symbol of compassion. What mattered was that the love that built him was now multiplying through other lives, other hands, other hearts. A single firefly drifted past the board, glowing softly like a tiny lantern. Keanu smiled at it. "Kindness," he murmured, "is the move no one expects." Keanu stayed seated beneath the acacia tree as the night deepened, letting the stillness settle into his bones. In the distance, he could hear faint laughter from families walking home, the soft chatter of students leaving evening classes, and the distant hum of motorcycles weaving through the Nairobi streets. Life was moving all around him, but here in this quiet corner, time felt slower, calmer, kinder. The pawn sat alone at the center of the board, illuminated by the moonlight. Keanu traced the grain of the wood, with his eyes remembering every lesson his stepfather had etched into him without ever raising his voice. Lessons about patience, humility, perseverance, and love. Lessons he once thought were ordinary, only to realize years later that they were extraordinary gifts built from sweat and sacrifice. He thought about Viktor's father in icy Novosibirsk, Jamila's mother who taught her using stones on dirt floors, the trucker in West Virginia who sold his guitar so his daughter could learn the game, the boy in Vietnam who carved pieces from bottle caps, the Amish girl who taught her grandmother to play. All these stories formed a tapestry woven from the same thread, parents and guardians giving everything so a child could dream. Keanu leaned forward and closed the chessboard, running a hand across the top of it, as if sealing those memories gently inside. For years, he had carried the weight of wanting to honor his stepfather. Now, he understood that honoring didn't require fame or success. It required faithfulness to the love he'd been given, a love that expected nothing in return. He stood and began walking slowly down the gravel path, carrying the board at his side. The night was cool, and a soft mist settled above the pond, creating a shimmering reflection of the stars overhead. He paused by the water's edge, watching the ripples move like quiet breaths across the surface. Children's voices echoed in his memory, the laughter from the Nairobi tournament, the gasp when a brilliant move appeared, the shy hope in Jamila's voice when she first stepped onto the global stage, the disbelief in the West Virginia girl's eyes when she hugged him. These memories weren't just moments. They were proof that the foundation was alive, breathing, growing, and touching corners of the world that too often felt forgotten. Keanu sat again on a wooden bench near the pond and rested the board beside him. He looked up, letting his eyes wander across the constellations. Somewhere above those glowing points of light, he imagined the people whose sacrifices had shaped these stories. His stepfather, Viktor's mother, Jamila's mother, countless others whose names the world might never know. Their love had built bridges that spanned continents and cultures, bringing strangers together through a simple game of thought and patience. He whispered again, more softly this time, "For you." The words were not just for his father now, they were for all of them. The parents who worked quietly, the caregivers who held the world together through hardship, the ones who believed in a child even when no one else did. Love like that didn't die. It echoed forward, shaping generations. A gentle wind brushed against his face. It felt like an answer. Then, as the scene faded in his mind, a final message rose clear and steady, and a reminder that the world still needed these stories. The world still needed kindness, sacrifice, and second chances. Kindness is the move no one expects. A pause settled in the air, warm and steady, before the closing words formed with quiet strength. If this story touched your heart, tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever sacrificed for someone you love, or has someone sacrificed for you? Share it in the comments. And if you believe in second chances, hit that like and subscribe button. We've got another incredible story for you coming tomorrow.